Welcome back to the Imaginary Gallery. It's TJ here, and tonight's topic is counter manipulation plus revenge. Now, I always mention Sasha Sloan because she did a really nice video. I did one too a few weeks or months back. It was called something like, Am I the Abused or the Abuser? But she summed it up totally like the way I wish I could have. But I'll just reiterate so it fits to the story, because a lot of people out there evidently think counter manipulation is just the same as the narcissist attacking you. And she has made it succinctly clear that that's not the case. And the example I'll use is, if you are sitting on the street doing nothing, not hurting anyone, and minding your own business, and somebody comes up to you and attacks you or hits you or calls you a name, well, they have aggressed upon you. Well, if you just sit there and say, oh, hit me again, yell at me again, you are being a fool. And if you have self-respect, then you will push them away. Well, imagine that person then running to their mommy and saying, he's violent, he pushed me. Well, that's what these people do. But you didn't wake up with the idea to go push somebody. You woke up with the idea to mind your own business, and somebody came up and aggressed against you. So what did you do? You shoved them away because you're preserving yourself. Well, that's the theme for this discussion. That's just a listen to her video. It's better, but that's the basic idea. That if you aggress against someone who's aggressed against you, then it's not the same as when they deliberately target you for some kind of confrontation that's uncalled for. So, what we'll do is give you a true story time. One of the many narcissists, whatever I've dealt with. This one's actually an example I'm proud of counter manipulation slash revenge. This was one of them that I worked with that lied all the time, lied from day one, which I found out later, but regardless. Our little almost 3 year thing had ended, and stupidly I found myself missing this person for some sickening reason, because with any relationship there is good stuff and there's bad stuff. So I was, of course, mind was like filtering out the bad because he wasn't around, and so I was like missing certain good stuff. So I somehow he did the no contact to me and was obviously moving on to the next target, and I couldn't be there in the way. So I knew who the target was because he used to work in my section of the building, and then he moved to the other building that we had, and there was somebody there that he had mentioned he thought was hot once. And then I noticed that that's the one he's chasing now. Well, there was no contact for a while, but then there was a Hoover, and I can't really say if it was my initiation or maybe his initiation of the hoovering, but again, at that point, I didn't know all this stuff then. So I was like, oh, wow, I get to see him again? Oh. And so he would, like, invite me over to his place. But I kept noticing something that was disturbing, because he had claimed he'd been depressed and alone and blah, blah, was, of course, phony. And I thought it was. And when you deal with this person long enough, you start to realize, oh, and you keep it to yourself. You're like, that was a phony story. But anyway, I would be there at his apartment watching a movie, whatever, eating food or whatever, but his phone would always buzz, and we'll call him James. James, it would say, new text message from James, and that was the one that I knew that he was chasing at the office. Kind of like he did to me, but now it's like a new one because I was all marked up and used up because I knew all of the secrets. Well, the new person didn't, so this was like fresh meat for him. But I could see what was going on at this point. So I've been through all this. I know what you're doing. But I would notice these texts repeatedly and remember how I used to get texts repeatedly from this monster. So it's like, this is the same thing. And so I would, again, say, you're dating James, aren't you? And his response would be, no, we're just friends. And I'd say, oh, yeah, right. He has a boyfriend. And since when does that stop anybody? But he would. What's sickening is that a few encounters I would notice the same thing every time. Nobody else but James. And so I would again say, what are you messing with James for? And I'd get the same response. He has a boyfriend. He's just a friend. Well, I happened to have a friend who worked in the building and knew James and knew James's partner and was friends with them. So I shared my suspicions, saying, you know what? I think this monster is seeing James. And he was like, I don't think so. I know James and his partner named Bobby B, we'll just say. And you do? Who is the boyfriend again? Bobby B. So I kept that in mind because when I was at the monster's apartment and the phone was buzzing, there were times when he would like be in the other room or asleep or something, and I would see that phone and be tempted to grab it and read it, but I at the same time didn't want to, even though I should have, because he did it to me like way back at the beginning when we first met. But I withheld. Plus I was afraid of what I'd see because I had this sick notion that possibly things might work out with us if now that we've been through all this crap that we could like move beyond it, but obviously that's not an option with this type of person. They just have to find a fresh new supply. So of course at this point I didn't want to believe this, but finally, oh actually no, I heard the name Bobby B. So in my spare time I pulled up Facebook and I searched for Bobby B. And there was Bobby B, which is James's partner, supposedly. Well, at this point, I had nothing to go on. I just assumed, which I've learned again, the gut feeling hasn't failed me yet. But, of course, with gaslighting people, they'll just tell you that you're mistaken or you're just imagining. And one little thing to note is that's disgusting is the other relationship I had that was 11 years, he was doing the same kind of thing with some other person that had a boyfriend, and which it's like, since when does that stop anyone? He was pursuing this other one who had a boyfriend and uses that as an alibi, and it turned out they actually got together. He left me for this kid, which beat him up later, but that's a different story. But I would suspect that as well. I'd say, you're dating that person. And the other one from 11 years would say the exact same line as this other monster we're talking about, which is, the only reason you think that is because that's the only name you've seen on my phone. Now that is disgusting because they're both saying the exact same line, that I'm just imagining things because every time I see the phone, it's this other person. Well, my point is, well, yeah, that's the only person who's texting you, so I know you. If you're texting somebody that much, I know. I'm not dumb. I'm not retarded like you people. But they both pulled the same scam, and of course, they were both guilty of messing with this person who had a boyfriend. So having a boyfriend doesn't matter, obviously, in this gay world of narcissism. It's so happy and wonderful. But anyway, back to the original story. I was back at this person's house again and again. Don't ask why I went back, because I was retarded. I was temporarily insane because I should have just let it go. But again, I was thinking I've invested this much time. Certainly we could fix this or fix that, but that doesn't work with these people. You cannot fix anything. So one particular night, I was there again, which again, this wasn't like a regular thing, but still, I'm shoving the times together for the sake of storytelling. But I was back, and one particular night, the phone was left out, and he said, well, I'm going to bed. You can come to bed when you're ready. So I said, fine, and I was watching TV and so on, but then the phone buzzed. And I wonder now if maybe it wasn't left out on purpose so I would see it, but I don't know. That's, again, just a theory. But it buzzed, and it buzzed, and it buzzed, and it was the same thing. New text message from James. Well, finally I had it, and I said, you know what? I'm doing it. So I grabbed it, I opened it, and I looked at it, and I saw, which was disgusting, the same types of messages between the two of them that he used to send to me, which is the thing I invented, which was XOXO, and I'd see that in this and think, you're using the line I made up on that monster. So it was, again, I started to see what I was dealing with. A fool who is like a one-trick pony who does this, well, a 100-trick pony, but as far as the individual tricks, does the same thing to everybody. Yawn. But at this point, when I looked at the messages, I saw the XO, and I saw other messages that were suggestive of relations that had been going on. And remember, this other person has Bobby B. So I thought, you know what? That does it. Because I was trying to work on making things work with the monster, because again, I was still retarded and not out of the daze yet. But so I picked up my own phone, went to Facebook, and I found Bobby B, and I was kind of mad, and I said, kind of hateful, but out of the blue, I don't even know him, but I said, would you tell your boyfriend to stop texting my boyfriend all the time? And that was kind of a lie, because it wasn't my boyfriend. But my goal, of course, was to follow, which I didn't mention earlier, but he had told me, well, we can see if things work out. We can try to work things out with us again. So that was my false hope. But this other person was not helping out, and I figured, he's already got somebody, Bobby B, so I figured I'd go to Bobby B, and I was like, your boyfriend is texting mine all the time, and I'm sick of it. Well, he wrote back friendly, like, really? Who is it? And I told him, and he's like, I've never even heard of that person. I thought, well, of course, it sounds like they're both the same. But we started to chat back and forth, and we discussed this. And he would mention, well, he has been gone a lot lately, which is his James. And I think, yeah, well, something's probably going on. And we were, again, talking back and forth. Well, the monster had no idea that I was carrying on this interaction, and I was still kind of like partially back into its life. So, like, I would be texting it again, not the way it was before, but there would be times like we'd be texting from, like, let's say noon on to like 3, and then nothing. Well, I'd then hear from Bobby B saying that he hasn't heard from his James. So I thought, you know what? This is strange. I bet they're together. But that was just an assumption. It probably was accurate, but that didn't really matter. The point was, I was trying to patch stuff up with the monster, yet the monster was insisting on chasing after James, even though James's partner was completely, Bobby B, was completely in the dark. And eventually, Bobby B asked James, hey, who is Mr. Monster? And of course, the same old crap. Oh, he's just a friend. Everybody's just a friend, I've learned. That's sickening, but that's the line that's used. So if you're a cheater, just say that your other partner's a friend, because that's what they all do. But eventually, I noticed that the James was also on one of the online applications for bears, and he was on there. And I would mention this to Bobby B, saying, hey, do you know that your partner's also on that website? And I don't know if he did or not. I can't remember that part. But I had a profile on there, but it didn't have a face, because James knew who I was. But in the picture, you don't know, I had like a headless torso. So Bobby B suggested, why don't you send James a wolf, which is something you click, kind of like a like or a poke on Facebook. So I figured, you know what, maybe I will. So I did. I clicked wolf on my way to work one day. Well, like 2 minutes later, I got a message returned. Thanks for the wolf. Keep in mind, this is James, which is Bobby B's partner, and I got the thanks for the wolf, so I was like telling him I got a thanks for the wolf. And he said, why don't you start talking to him? Ask him questions. Ask him what he's into. Ask him if he's single. Ask him this and ask him that. And I figured, well, you know what? I know what he's going through. I went through it. You know what? I'll voluntarily agree to do it. So I started like, yeah, so what are you into? And I got a message or an answer, which I won't repeat here. But then I, of course, relayed that back. And then I said, so, do you like threesomes? And the person said, oh, well, my boyfriend's kind of straight-laced, so not really. And so then I told him that. He's like, well, he gave me the next line. So it's like, well, I said, do you ever play alone? And his response was, I can sometimes. Which right there told me, okay, he's not devoted to anybody. So this, he's just a friend from the monster is totally invalid. Plus, the messages I saw, it all added up together, and these people think they can fool. They think I'm retarded. I'm going to fall for this fake stuff, and so I was, again, I was pretty sure at this, well, I was certain at this point. So, and I think I also took a screenshot of the conversation and sent it to the boyfriend because he needed to know. And plus, what makes this horrible is the monster, when I dated it at the beginning, I knew it was a loose whore, and it was trying for marriage like after the first month, and I was saying stuff to it like, you don't need to be married to one guy. Come on, you like to play around. You're not going to be satisfied with one. And he would say, oh, yes, I am. I'm faithful. I never lie. I'm devoted. I'm loyal. And then here he is, participating, being the other woman, basically, in a relationship with or someone who already has a relationship. And I thought, you are a fake phony, because a person with that value system would have nothing to do with someone who is already spoken for. I mean, that's just common sense. But they think they don't have any. They're living in a fantasy world. So anyway, I kept talking to the Bobby B, and he was actually much cuter than James. James was, never mind, but Bobby B was a lot nicer to look at and friendlier. Well, I didn't know the other one that well. But after those conversations online, he knew what was up. And we were chatting one night online, or on the text, and I mentioned that because I had become recently single, I had acquired a toy that's designed for men that has special characteristics to it, and I had just thrown that out. Oh, yeah, I just got this new toy. Well, he responded something like, ooh, I'd love to try that out. And I figured, really? And stuff started going through my head, and thought, you know what? That would be the perfect revenge. If here monsters dating James behind Bobby B's back, if I had Bobby B over to my house to play around, perfect. So, I arranged it. I said, oh, sure. And I gave a time and a date, and he came over. And then one thing he said that was interesting when he came in the door is, one thing, let's not talk about this one or this one, which is Monster or James. And I thought, fine. So I got to experiment with the toy and share it, and I said something like, we don't want to stoop to their level and like do whatever they did, we're assuming, but figured, well, we can do this, like switch toys and anyway, so on. But it was light. But anyway, it happened, and I just felt a sense of revenge, thinking, you think you can lie to me all this time when you know what you're doing? Well, fine. And of course, I didn't reveal all this, but it was just it wasn't really counter, it's more of a revenge. But I called it counter manipulation, meaning I wouldn't normally do that. Like if someone's got a partner, I wouldn't like try to lure them over here with a toy. But in this case, I figured, you know what? You and I are both in the same spot. We should celebrate together. And it was interesting. And didn't solve the problem with the monster, but it was still fun. In continuation of the last story, there was another example where I actually did use counter manipulation, because one thing I've learned when dealing with these people is they're kind of dumb. I mean, they have their methods they use that typically work, but it's kind of like a formula that they follow. And I can throw that formula off balance because I have creativity. I can think creatively and adjust and switch situations to make things way more interesting than their generic scams that they pull one after another on different people. So another evening that I was over there at this monster's apartment, what was funny was those messages kept coming through again, and the phone once again was left out, like out in the room where I was, and he'd gone to bed again. So I figured, well, the phone's ringing. It's my turn now. So I checked it, and I was getting kind of mad because I could tell by what I could read that this James had no clue that Monster was still even talking to me, because Monster had erased my name out of his phone, which is a total insult. But he'd taken my name out of his phone, and Monster, again, kept texting, so I finally had enough this time. This was before all the other stuff that I just mentioned, but I said, you know what? It's time to perform. So I grabbed that phone, and he was just saying regular stuff about regular things, like, oh, do you want to see me tomorrow? I want to get together tomorrow. And great, sick. But I texted back to him, I think I'm in love with TJ. He's here tonight, spending the night. And I knew that James had no idea that he was even talking to TJ. So he wrote back something like, are you drunk? And so I just laughed at this, thinking, you know what, these people are fools. They deserve this counter manipulation. So I just kept it going for a little while. And then the trick I learned from Monster was, after the conversation was over, I deleted everything. So if he picked up his phone tomorrow, it would just look normal. So I just went, after we woke up, I left. I figured, you know what? Let's just count down the time it takes before a flying monkey is contacted. And sure enough, within like an hour after I got home, one of the flying monkeys he knows that's naive and gullible, he knew he could get to her. Well, evidently the person, James, had contacted Monster, so Monster was taken by surprise, which I figured, you know what, counter manipulation, you deserve it after all the stuff you pull. Because again, I wouldn't normally do this just on my own, but because of what was done, I figured, see how you like a taste of your own medicine. So sure enough, my friend that was the flying monkey he adopted was like saying, did you send a message to somebody on their phone and blah blah blah? I thought, yes, I did. And the flying monkeys, but hi. But it was just, I could feel it. It's like I had this intuition feeling, any minute a flying monkey is going to contact. And sure enough, but I just thought it was funny because that let James know that Monster was full of crap, because how else would that have happened if it wasn't him, unless of course he made up some story. But it doesn't matter. The point was, counter manipulation can be good, but again, you don't really want to mess with these people because they'll just do something else worse. So it's not recommended, especially if the person's violent. But I figured I'd have some fun with it because, after all, I was fooled for many years and figured, you know what? You need a taste of your own medicine.